Good morning. All right. I hope you all have had good rest, good sleep over last night. Yes? I'm beginning to notice that all of you are of a very quiet disposition, very introverted. So I'm wondering, the first thing here on the 8:30 program is Q&A, and I'm wondering whether I will get any cues. Or are we all quite contented and quite peaceful? Yes.
I heard that you did yoga before coming to Vajrayana, and then
Venerable, can we just pause it? For those who need to ask questions, if you raise your hand, we'll bring the mic to you so that the rest of the demonstrators can, yogis can hear the question. Thank you.
It's already on.
thank you. Yeah, I heard that you did yoga before coming to Vajrayana. Are you still doing yoga? And it's like yoga is a different school of philosophy, but it's also coming from India. And I just sort of get some understanding or your understanding about those two schools.
So the question is about yoga as a school of philosophy versus Buddhism?
Yeah.
Okay. First thing, I must say that I didn't really do yoga. My wife then did yoga a lot, and every now and again her instructor would organize a yoga retreat, and I get to tag along and then do that yoga retreat for, I don't know, similar 7 days, 9 days. Sometimes very often in nice idyllic places. I think once was in Bali, once was in east coast of Malaysia on a beach. Very much like Jhana Grove. I don't know all that much about their philosophy, but obviously it's a philosophy of peace, much like Buddhism. Idea that calmness, wholesomeness inside brings good health brings peace, peace brings happiness. And I don't know enough about yoga to make this claim. The Buddha goes one step. The Buddha himself claimed this as a unique teaching of the Buddhas, which is to understand the end of suffering. I don't know of other religions that do the same thing to the extent that the Buddha went. In that, the Buddha actually recognized this thing called afterlife. But instead of one afterlife, whether you end up in a good place or a bad place, the Buddha said, you have many more afterlives to come, good and bad, until you at some point quit the game. And you have had many lives before this life. You just don't remember it. And until you do, you won't get tired. You're not fed up of it yet. Most of us have got no recollection of what happened in the past, how many lives. So strange as some people would find it, but how do you find it? It's you come across somebody like the Buddha and his disciples who have actually seen it and then tell you about it, and then they tell you, actually there's a place that's actually happier than where you are now, happier than any of the heavens, where you stop playing, you're free. Here's another unique part of the Buddha's teaching. a lot of us think, okay, when we went to the breakfast table this morning, I chose to have either tea or coffee. I chose how many teaspoons of sugar I wanted to put in my cup. I chose whether it was cereals or toast or what do you call it? Porridge or oats or whatever it was. But we don't see what is pushing us from the back to make those choices. And the Buddha says, there's actually this thing at the back behind you pushing you to pick your two teaspoons of sugar. And that thing is called craving. You think you made the choice. Craving made you make the choice. And then the Buddha went on to sit down in his meditation that fateful night under the Bodhi tree. And then he went and looked backwards, forwards. What is before craving? And he came up with this long explanation, well, not that long, 13 steps. Starting from ignorance at one end. Because of ignorance, you think you can find something better. Therefore, you start developing your sense organs and your taste buds, and you can now taste this coffee is better than that coffee. This coffee has something called crema. I never knew all this until I came to Bodhi Jhana. And then now, what used to be two same cups of coffee is now a different cup of coffee. And now, because somebody told me about it, I tasted the difference. I now have a preference. Is that my free will, or has it been created? And what created it? So the Buddha then says, we go through this process throughout our whole lives. We want a better house, better car, better phone, better partner, better anything. So long as you can taste the difference, you want the better one. And you think it's your free will making that choice, chasing after that item. So what happens is that we sit here in this meditation hall, and then we say we are contented. We are not chasing anything. Seen enough of it. And then as you go deeper and deeper someday, you see this whole 13 steps that the Buddha talked about, not as a theoretical framework that was presented to us in the suttas, but you actually see it. Yes, I had that cup of coffee, and I had this desire coming up. I now have a view about the different grades of coffee, the different kinds of coffee. I now have learned how to detect coffee that was just ground this morning and coffee that was ground last week. All the little differences, and then you see how you're being pushed forward on and on and on by this thing called craving. So that's the one unique thing about Buddhism that I think I haven't found anywhere else. Yeah. So yes, but by all means, do make use of your yoga practices, yoga exercises, keep yourself healthy. Apply the same ideas of quietness, silence, and kindness into your actions.
I have a question around, sometimes when I'm meditating, I come to what feels like really profound conclusions and insights, and I was just wondering if it was worth putting off the meditation when that happens in order to be able to digest that fully, because oftentimes there's a lot of emotional weight to it, and I'm not certain if it's attaching to these intellectual pursuits as a bit of an ego thing, or whether it's actually driving me towards something better, and I feel like it's the latter. But also secondly saying that part of that insight that I got as well is realizing that a lot of the questions I ask here are more about seeking reassurance and that I'm doing the right thing rather than if like getting an actual answer, because a lot of the questions I ask, there's not a distinct answer it feels like anyone can give me. It's a very, you kind of have to find it for yourself. And I've spoken to Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Brahmali, and it often feels like I'm walking away with the feeling that, hey, they didn't actually answer the question. So just, it feels like it's putting me in that position where they're trying to get me to like trust in myself a bit more and actually find that, which is funny because I have people sometimes like, hey, this is like a really insightful question, but you know, if I just sat with it, I'd have found the answer. And then also if I didn't ask the question, then maybe other people wouldn't be pondering it. So it's just to get back to the question, like, is it worth putting off meditation to be able to sit with those insights and really digest them and come back later, or would it, yeah?
Okay, I would like to ask, when you say you put aside meditation, what are you actually doing after that?
What do you mean doing after it? Like,
As in, after you put aside meditation, what are you doing?
So at least like for the example of last night, I kind of just sat in the pondering and I wasn't meditating. But once everyone left the room, I went back into it and kind of, I think what it was about was just, it was a distraction that I was working through and allowing it to be there for the moment, but not actually wanting to sit with it all that long. Because like I said, there's an aspect of feeling like I'm learning something about how I've been navigating the world and how I need to change that. But to actually integrate it and digest it, I do need to just sit with it and not just simply notice a thing and then go on to the next thing without actually practicing the integration. So.
Okay, I think I understand the question. So you're sitting there, a thought comes up, a situation, a history, a profound realization. And then when that happens, you go on to analyze it, logic, reason, or whatever that is, right? Here's my suggestion. I know because we are doing guided meditation, so I talk too much in the meditation. The reason being, I knew when I was a beginner meditator, when you get 2 minutes of silence, the mind loses itself, thinking stuff, picking up whatever. So when a teacher in front starts talking, or at least gives you the next piece of guidance, the mind quickly comes back. So that is what I'm doing for you, but I'm not sure if I'm talking too much or too little, so I appreciate feedback. Having said that, what I also do is I'm giving you guidance based on what I feel. I can't feel what you feel. So I might be pointing to the abdominal area, whereas you might be having a splitting headache, for example, and you actually should be attending to the splitting headache rather than the abdominal area. So when you have a thought that comes up, or any sensation, any event that happens in your body or in your mind that is really calling out for attention, help, help, I'm in pain here, I'm suffering, that in Ajahn Brahm's teachings, that's the anger-eating monster sitting on the throne. That's the one that needs attention right here, right now. I don't know what's going on in each of you, so feel free to ignore my instructions and attend to the anger-eating monster.
I just think a bit of the nuance there is when I'm talking about those kinds of insights, this
Yes.
isn't me sitting here and being like, oh, this is like a thing I did wrong that I'm beating myself up for. It's something where it's like, oh, this is how I could handle it better. This is how I could navigate things. This is how I could grow as a person. And I feel like as long as that's not something that I falling into some lies of my own ego, that like that isn't worth completely avoiding, but also knowing that I can come back to it as well.
So here's what Ajahn and many other Ajahns before him tell us, that a lot of these problems, trying to think through them intellectually sometimes creates more problems. As in, okay, that guy was rude, I'm going to whatever, and those are intellectual processing in order not to have to encounter that again or to fix it or make it right or whatever. On the other hand, what a lot of these ajahns tell us is to sit with that insight, whatever arises, as you would a good if you can imagine the kindest, sweetest kindergarten teacher, and you have this anger-eating child in front of you, would the kindergarten teacher be trying to reason with this child? Not really, right? But you would try to soothe the child, give him an ice cream, and let the emotion settle. As you observe the child, as you interact with the child with kindness, the answer comes to you. You realize, perhaps something happened at home that day. Perhaps this child didn't get breakfast. And those understanding helps inform the solution. I do hope to talk about, okay, let's talk about this. I'll take more questions later. What I've noticed in my few years here in Jhana, talking to people, is that when people are going through a difficult time, or people are grumpy by nature, or depressed by nature, there's a lot of stuff that they don't really want to tell you about. A lot of it goes back to childhood history or perception of self and all. I was fortunate enough to have one young man come and tell me his journey. He's actually Ajahn Brahm's disciple. He's been here in this hall several 9-day retreats. He used to, I'm not sure if he still does, have an addiction problem playing computer games late into the night. Wake up next morning, go to school or go to work. He's been around for a few years now. And then he would be grouchy because he didn't have enough sleep, but he can't let go of the game because that game, the online game, gave him a status. He would reach so many points and he would become, I don't know what the titles and ranks are in that game, but that gave him a sense of self-worth that he didn't have otherwise. So one time he came and told me, very excited, he told me he had a friend who took him on an inward journey. Sat him down, lit the candles, soft music in the background, close your eyes, go in, back to your childhood, back. And after about 2 hours, he told me, he came across a dark figure in his mind space, faceless, ominous, standing in the shadows, looking at him. He didn't feel comfortable about it, obviously. Told his guide. His guide tells him, tell him to go away. Please go away. He doesn't go away. Tell him more forcefully to go away. Go away. Figure still stands there staring at him. And then he remembered his experiences here in this hall, Ajahn's teachings. And this was the time when we had Lord of the Rings and all the... He, in his mind, pulled out a wizard's blanket, walked up to that fellow, wrapped his hands and the blanket around this guy and gave that dark figure lots and lots and lots of metta. And he could describe it in his mind's eye. He said, when I hug this fellow, he stiffened up, but did not resist. For a long time he was there, and then finally he said, I feel good now. Let go. Stood back, looked him in the face. And apparently, the way he described it, this character sheepishly turned and walked away. So, how would you figure that out in an intellectual, rational way if you wanted a solution? He just kind of felt, okay, kind to this figure, kind to this, and he just did kindness as he knew how. And that didn't completely solve all his problems, but it reduced the fear towards this thing inside his mind. So, what I did want to talk about this morning is sometimes that many of us have had bad experiences in the past, and the worst ones are the ones during childhood, because those are the ones that formed our opinions, formed our thinking habits a lot. This young man also had his troubles. He had a mother who survived two depressed grandparents. So this young man's maternal grandparents were war torture victims. So they were like, when they had him, when they had her, the mother, the two parents were somewhere in North China, having been persecuted by the Japanese just after the war, around the wartime. So they were depressed, they were Chandu opium addicts, and so this mother at 8 years old had to cook for her family. And her brothers are also victims of the same depressed parents, and therefore were quite useless, gambling the whole day, didn't contribute anything. Eventually, this mother made her way to Australia and became a very strong woman, as in very capable, managed to buy property, get married, and have 2 sons. But she placed the same expectations that she had on her useless brothers onto her kids. So the kids were always spoken down to. In her mind, she's trying to encourage them to be more hardworking, to be more independent, to be more diligent. But in the son's mind, he didn't feel very loved. He always felt useless. He always felt not very worthy. And that stuck in his head such that he needed to find his worthiness elsewhere, in a computer game, wherever. And I think what happens is this realization, after he has come into our circle and we talked about it, and the realization that this self-perception of uselessness is a root cause of a lot of his problems. It's like, you can imagine if you were a teenager, right, and you have a bunch of friends, but you keep getting reminded, I'm useless. Then, even when the teacher is trying to tell you about algebra, they're trying to tell you about chemistry or geography or anything, the next kid will be listening intently, and I will be ruminating, why did I upset mother this morning? Why was mother upset at me this morning? And so a lot of those early experiences can ruin a person's thought habits, and then ruin a person's perception of the world, ruin a person's sense of happiness. what I hope to do for you this weekend is to try and change that. Firstly, by being able to sense what is going on inside, and this is what the silence is about. When you're quiet and you're listening, perhaps you hear the story of this faceless figure that you otherwise don't meet. And then when you do meet this faceless figure, the hope is that you'll be brave enough, patient enough, and kind enough to sit with it, hear the story, have that compassion, and hopefully heal. And then beyond that, hopefully then the next day you will be a happier person, less bothered. As I was sitting out there this morning at the stupa, I was thinking, how do I relate this story? Like yes.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I think a lot of what you're saying here really has practical benefits to what I've already experienced, and I'd like to potentially, after this, maybe there might be worthwhile in us having a dialogue, but what you're highlighting with not reacting to these faceless figures and this kind of internal stuff that might not be flattering to look at, a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of been modeled after certain Buddhist practices, which I think is really profound. And secondly, I've only been practicing and attending Dharmaloka for just under 2 months now. And already I've seen ways to be able to implement a lot of these practices, where recently I had a conversation with someone where someone was asking me if I believe certain things in a very accusatory way. And in the past, I would have been the type of person to turn around and say, "Oh, you're just an idiot, misunderstanding me, can't believe it, you're not even putting in the effort to try and understand me." And then I realized, after, and this is what I mean with the insights and not trying to look at it with too much with logic, it's that emotional aspect, because I'm also not digging for the insight, I'm just letting it arise naturally. But then it's, how I actually ended up handling the conversation instead, because I've had the time to let these insights sit and digest, is instead of even trying to prove that I didn't believe those things, I just asked her, "Hey, are you okay? Because it seems like there's some things that you are really struggling with, and these things are things that you've seen in other people." And eventually, after I settled and diffused the conversation, I actually came back to her later just to make sure she was okay, and ended up actually having a deeper friendship because of it, because we turned what was misunderstanding on one part to actually a greater understanding. And I took the risk, and she could have came back at me with a kind of hostility and not done it, but I still think it was worth it, because even though that conversation was challenging, it was challenging in the ways that needed to be able to start putting those things into practice and actually make those changes. And yeah, just like I said with the understanding, and now it's one of those things where I've got someone who I can talk to about some of these things, because some of the stuff that she was saying are around issues that I previously had but don't currently have issues with. So, even just telling her that, yeah, I can see you're hurting, and in some cases you're right, you're not here. Maybe it's 50% accurate because we're looking at what it used to be like, and I'm talking about moving past it. But it was just a real profound moment, and I think, like you're saying, it's very applicable. But maybe I'm a bit of an outlier here in terms of the fact that I said that I've only been doing this for less than 2 months now, and I've gotten so much out of it. I don't feel like is normal, but I'd have to ask others. But what it feels like for me is that there's been other things in my past where it feels like a lot of these things have just been bubbling and waiting to come up to the surface. Because the example I gave about the fact that a lot of my questions, it feels like it comes from a place of looking for reassurance, that's not logically looking into it. That was identifying feelings of needing to be validated and feeling a sense of belonging, and instead of I was wrapping all those emotions around no, yeah, logic, and it wasn't actually it. So yeah.
So try this scenario. So let's say we are back at that 5-star restaurant, and there's this couple sitting there, and they've been asked to do a review of that 4-course dinner or 3-course dinner. And you have been tasked to be the waiter for that table. Your job is to make sure everything is tip-top. You're going to serve the dishes from the right side, remove the plates on the other side. You're going to make sure that water glass is always 3/4 full. You'll make sure the temperature is right. You make sure the dishes come and go at the right time. Remove all the crumbs when you have the opportunity. But then you realized this couple is having a Cold War. And chances are they're not going to give you a very good review. If you went up to either of them and said, "So, madam, how did you find the soup?" Or, "Sir, was the bread okay?" Do you think you will get a nice answer? Of course not, right? That Cold War, the bad emotions, will spill onto everything that he's going to say or she's going to say. It's just how it is. We don't compartmentalize our emotions that well. So when you're sitting here on your cushions or mats on your chairs, and you say, "Okay, I'm going to have kindness for myself," and there's this other person sitting there, your ex-boss, this person you quarreled with, sitting at the other side of the dining table, and say, "I'm going to be cool and equanimous, I'm going to be meditating on kindness." It's hard. So if you are having a Cold War inside, or the space is being shared with a dark figure that you'd really rather not talk to, chances are, if a friend or a waiter or somebody else comes along and asks you, "How's your day? How do you like the soup?" It's not going to be very tasty soup. For sure. It's just how it is, because there's this other thing in here. And you don't feel comfortable. So, solution, the Buddha's solution is very big picture. He says, take the 5 precepts. Don't kill, don't steal, don't have sexual misconduct, don't lie, don't intoxicate yourself. Why? When you take out these gross misdemeanors, chances are there will be fewer people who are upset with you, there are fewer people who would be angry at you, and there won't be so many of these figures in your mind space. And then as you start listening more to the Dhamma teaching, it will start saying things like, in addition to not lying, try not to have harsh speech, not to speak too loudly and not to be too accusatory and not to tell tales about some of those other not so great monks. Because every time you do these things, somehow it comes back to you as one other figure in your mind space. Then he says, all right, once you have taken your 5 precepts and once you have started cleaning up your act, your perception of the world is better. Now your dinner table, the guest at the dinner table, your dining partner, is somebody you actually enjoy, not somebody you're having a quarrel with. And your day becomes brighter. Then we say, okay, I'm going to relax now. I have an hour of free time. I'm going to sit down and meditate. Just to be with myself and my friend, the breath. And your life will just be more peaceful. And it works both ways. The Buddha didn't quite say this in his suttas, but I thought about it and I said, once you become sensitized to pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings, once you become sensitized to why unpleasant feelings come up, the cause of these dark figures, you will know not to bring them into the house, right? You know not to bring them onto the dining table. And how? Your speech will improve, your attitude to the world will improve, your sense of ethics comes up automatically. I remember somebody this was said of somebody who did a hypnotic past life regression. Apparently what happens is it's basically you're doing a life review, just as they say what happens when you're about to die, when you see a car crash coming right in front of you or something. You do a whole life review in that split second. And the way it was described by some of them is that it's not just you watching an event on a television screen. It's you re-experiencing those events with all the emotions. If you had a major quarrel, those emotions in the quarrel comes up. What's even more profound, you experience both sides of that event. You experience your anger, you also experience how the other person felt in front of your anger. And then when he came out from his regression, his comment to Ajahn Brahm was, you have no choice. Once you come, you have no choice but to keep the 5 precepts. How can you not, if you can see those events retrospectively, and then know that your future quarrels will have the same effect? And Ajahn Brahm, in one of his talks says, at the end of our lives, you're not going to see St. Peter at the pearly gates who will decide, you this way and you that. It doesn't happen that way. St. Peter will just show you a TV screen. Please re-experience the whole thing and decide where you want to go. If you see the TV screen and you feel horrible about your life, that's your next life. Apparently that's how it works. You choose, as it were. So, while the end goal of meditation is all these realizations and all this, the early part of meditation I found for myself is you have to try and settle your score with all these demons. And then you will have a peaceful space inside that you can actually sit and be at peace and be contented. Yeah? Do you want to do your question now or later? Now? Okay, come.
Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you, Venerable. Much merit to you for the teachings and your guidance. It's all very good. Thank you. Yesterday you introduced a concept that I haven't heard before. Now, if you have a pain in the body, one part of the body, you send metta to that part, and then you focus on that, and then most very often it goes away. And also we are familiar with the concept of you breathe in happiness or peace and breathe out that pain or the discomfort. And that is also, I mean, I've heard before and practiced it before. But combining, I think you try to combine the two, saying use breath as a vehicle to transport your metta to that spot. I haven't heard that before. And then you continued talking more, which unfortunately I didn't quite hear. So I'm hoping to listen to the online version and hoping that it is recorded well, and then revisit it. So it's not a question, I'm not asking you to repeat it here again. Thank you. So if there was a problem with the online version, then I will let you know. Thank you.
Okay. We are going to do a guided sit soon, but I will repeat it because it works well with the as a lead-in to the sit. As beginner meditators, we all know that, as I was saying earlier, to just sit quietly for half an hour, for most of us, the mind is too restless. It hasn't quite acquired this taste, this pleasure of just sitting there and have nothing to do. Ajahn Brahm, on the other hand, will be happy to sit in his cave for hours, overnight. He goes into his cave at the end of evening drinks at 7 p.m. He doesn't come out until 4 a.m. the next day. So, but as we try to acquire this taste, what I suggest is that you feed the mind with something to do as much as it requires feeding. So if I talk too much and you don't need the guidance, you can ignore me, that's fine, and just enjoy the breathing, enjoy the peace. But if the mind needs a feeding, then what I found is that the tastiest mind food are those that are pleasurable, that have meaning, that have joy in them. If I ask you to count how many bricks there are on the top of this, it's a boring exercise that doesn't mean anything to the person. But if I said, all right, imagine your cat was here on your lap, and the cat is staring you in the eyes. And you could just imagine a connection, again, a conversation that does not require words, but very meaningful. You would just enjoy it. And the breath, if you put that kindness, that connection into it, has that feeling. In the past, some instructors have told me, watch the breath at the tip of your nose, feel it going in, feel it going out. After about 3 breaths, 5 breaths, my mind chooses to chew on something else. Breath at the tip of the nose, what does it mean? What's the significance? Right? But if the breath is bringing kindness into your body, circulating it all around, the same breath feels different. Right? And the breath, the joy, the happiness, the kindness, as Ajahn Brahm calls it, that's the glue that holds your attention to the object. That's the relationship between you and what you're watching, the pain on the other side. Or just the breath on the other side. Or even your mind watching itself with the relationship in the middle, the caring for the mind. So these are just what the Buddha might call skillful means, seeing things in a way that helps you. Eventually you will, when the joy comes up a lot, you can just focus on the joy and ignore the breath. But that will happen naturally, don't rush it. So you're climbing one rung at a time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So 9:20, let's start a sit. Does anybody want to stretch or use the toilet or anything? Carry on. We'll start in maybe 5 minutes. Okay. As usual, make yourself really comfortable. And to do that, scan all the bodily sensations. And see if there's anything you can do to make yourself more comfortable. And again, I invite you to check out your abdominal area first. Relaxing those muscles again. Just creating space for all the organs inside the body, all your tummy, intestines. Give them space to move about and relax and digest this morning's breakfast. When you're paying this kindful, mindful attention, and the stomach trusts you, or the body trusts you, it can put down its defenses and relax. And soften. And again, some of you might discover a big change and you wonder, why do we habitually tighten our muscles? Why do we not relax? And I trust by now you can feel your breath more obviously than last night. And if you show kindness to the breath, perhaps the breath can pass it on to all the bits inside. as we did last night. Extend this treatment upwards to relax also the upper torso. Let the breath circulate freely and generously through the whole body. For good measure, let's also see if there's any tensions from the neck up to the head. Where this breath can work its magic. The neck, the jaw, the cheeks, the eyes, the forehead. For some of you, there might be an obvious monster sitting there that needs a bit of TLC. Some of you might be in a good space, and you just want to check in with every little small part. sometimes we get so used to holding a stress or a tension that we forget it's there and we don't feel it there. But if you remind yourself, relax, and let these tensions seep out and flow away. You realize that most of the time you can always relax a bit more. Relax. Like right now, I can feel as if part of me is still gripping at my mind, in my brains. And I have to mentally pry those fingers off. Let go. Stop squeezing. Instead of trying to concentrate and squeeze, it feels more like trying to fluff up the brain as if it were a pillow. Or trying to inflate a paper bag with a breath. Or even like airing an old storeroom that hasn't been open for a long time. If you're like me now, you might feel the brain uncrumpling. And just like silence, it might feel weird at first. Intuitively, you know that this is a healthier place to be. The unsquashed mind. Do taste the pleasantness. Is the pleasure and the kindness. And this idea of friendship. That allows the mind to sit here peacefully. Okay. Now I'd like to take you on an inward journey to another cave. It's interesting how we have scanned from the abdominal area up through the upper torso, through the neck up to the head. And for most of us, we have cleared the field, feathered the nest, we are feeling good. But now we want to enter another chamber. The seat of your emotions. Colloquially, we call it a heart. And just as we were prior to this looking for physical tension, physical aches, physical injuries, now we look to see if there are any emotional wounds. That might want to come and talk with us. And as we have been doing all along, this kindness of kindergarten teacher approach, being patient, being brave, being attentive, being kind, and just as you might have a conversation with a pet dog or pet cat, just by looking into the eyes, there's no need for words. Just listening, kind listening. remember always, you can ask breath to serve up some kindness, lighten the situation. Bring in some fresh air. Bring in some healing. Some of you might find this process discomforting. But intuitively, you know it's good work being done. Kindness in action. Let the breath massage the wounds. Let the breath bring in the compassion. To wherever any hurt might be felt. Whether it's to the self or to the other. Or to the heart itself. If you want, you can use the same trick that that young man I told you about used. Pull out a metta blanket, pass it to the breath, wrap it all around. Give it a hug. If you find it too intense and you want to take a break, you're also welcome to do that. Turn the mind back on itself. Watch the observer itself. Observe the observer. Place the mind on top of the breath and just float and relax. Rest for a while. Okay. So you have now become familiar with a few ideas. One, the breath that carries kindness. Can be a very pleasant staple for the mind. Something very pleasant to chew on. A place to rest. And then when the mind has this breath as a companion, It doesn't require other distractions. It's happy to just sit here. And of course, what we did right at the start was to make the physical body as comfortable a place as possible to start with. And then from this secure base, it's quite safe to go and explore the uncomfortable bits. That we establish a very wholesome, non-critical, non-judgmental space inside here. Allows issues to be brought up and presented, and worked through. In this space, you can take the time to notice a lot of the feelings and sensations that in our busyness is all masked and hidden. Perhaps now you want to just scan through the body again. Touch base with each and every little part. To see if there's any aching or injuries or discomforts. Okay. I will stop giving instructions here. You're free to do whatever you feel like, whether it's to just relax, to let the breath and the mind mingle, hang out, or if you feel like you want to go back to that space, the emotional space. Or just to enjoy the breath, up to you. As I was saying last night, don't push yourself to the point of resentment. You're free to come out anytime, hang out at the stupas outside, or use the walking paths, or go have a cup of tea, anything you wish. It is your holiday.